It began with a rumor, quiet, uncertain, whispered between exhausted soldiers who had long forgotten what hope felt like. A tunnel existed beneath the ruins, an old supply passage from a war before theirs, carved into the stone by hands long dead. According to the rumor, it led past the enemy lines, a way out, a way home. No one knew who first mentioned it, no map marked it, no officer confirmed it. Yet as artillery thundered closer each night, and as rations dwindled into nothing, the idea of an underground escape grew into something dangerously powerful. When the bombardment intensified on the 6th day, the men finally saw it. A jagged opening beneath the collapsed foundation of the old farmhouse. Stones ripped apart by shells had exposed a cavernous mouth in the earth. Cold air drifted out from the darkness, carrying a smell of damp rock and old dust. It felt ancient, wrong, as if the ground itself resented having been opened. Still, it was a way out. The commanding officer hesitated only a moment. Staying above ground meant death. The enemy was tightening the noose, gunfire creeping closer each hour. Supplies were gone, the wounded could no longer walk. Reinforcements were not coming. So the order was given. The men lit their lanterns, small trembling flames that looked too fragile to survive the void ahead, and stepped toward the opening. Their boots cracked, glass, stone, and debris underfoot. The tunnel yawned wider as they approached, swallowing light, swallowing sound, swallowing courage. Somewhere behind them another shell screamed overhead. The men entered the tunnel. None of them knew that the map they needed was not the one guiding them forward, but the one showing them how to return. And no one ever found that map. By the time the last man stepped into the darkness, the entrance had already begun to shift, sand and stone trickling downward like the first grains of an hourglass. The ground was ready to close, and the tunnel was ready to take what it had been waiting for. The orders were read in the dim glow of a lantern, its flame trembling as if aware of what was coming. The officer's voice stayed steady, but his hand clenched the paper so tightly that the edges tore. The message was simple. Hold position until reinforcements arrived. No timeline, no confirmation. Just a command that felt more like a sentence. Outside, the sound of artillery rolled closer, shaking the walls, raining dust from the ceiling. The wounded moaned softly, their breaths thin and broken. Food was nearly gone. Ammunition was dwindling. Every man in that ruined farmhouse knew reinforcements weren't coming. At least not in time to save them. That was when a private mentioned the rumor. A tunnel beneath them. A way out. A forgotten escape route carved decades before. The officer dismissed it at first, but another shell exploded outside, and the decision was made for him. Orders or not, staying meant death. Moving underground meant a chance. The opening was discovered by accident, hidden beneath broken stone and collapsed timber. When two soldiers pulled aside a charred beam, cold air rushed out, carrying the scent of deep earth and stagnant water. It felt like a breath from something ancient, and annoyed. Lanterns were lit. The men crouched beside the opening, peering into the darkness. The tunnel descended sharply, swallowing the light only a few meters in. No one could see the floor. No one could hear anything coming from within. It was silent in a way the war above never allowed. A decision was made. The strongest would lead, the wounded would follow, and the officer would remain in the center of the formation. One by one they climbed down, boots scraping old stone. For every man who entered, the air grew thicker, heavier, as if the earth resented the intrusion. The tunnel walls narrowed quickly. Men had to walk single file, shoulders brushing cold stones slick with moisture. Every footstep echoed unnaturally, multiplying into faint whispers that chased them deeper. The lanterns cast long shadows on the uneven walls, shadows that seemed to move a heartbeat too late. After only a few minutes of walking, the sound of the world above had completely vanished. No artillery, no wind, no distant voices, just the rhythmic drip of water and the labored breathing of frightened men trying to stay silent. When the officer ordered a brief halt, the men realized something unsettling. The air was colder behind them than ahead, as if the tunnel was slowly closing its mouth. An old half-burned map was all they had to guide them, found in the farmhouse days earlier, its edges singed, its markings faded. The officer unfolded it under lantern light, tracing lines of ink that barely clung to the paper. The route was vague, the tunnels branching like veins. The map suggested a left turn after 50 steps, but the tunnel curved right, then split, then narrowed. Nothing matched. The officer insisted they press forward, but the men exchanged worried glances. If the map was wrong, they were walking into the unknown. Moments later, the rear scout quietly approached the officer. "Sir, this place wasn't on any map, not even the old ones." The officer didn't respond. He simply folded the map away, knowing it had become useless. Minutes turned to hours. The deeper they went, the more unstable the structure became. Pebbles trickled from the ceiling, small bursts of dust drifted down with every step. The walls creaked like bones under pressure. Then a loud crack echoed down the passage. The men froze. A section of ceiling collapsed behind them, sealing the path with a thunderous roar. The lanterns flickered wildly as the tunnel filled with dust and coughing voices. When the air cleared, they saw it clearly. The way back was gone, completely buried. The earth had swallowed the entrance as if it had never existed. They were trapped in a corridor that stretched only forward. The tunnel eventually widened into a large chamber, dome-shaped and impossibly silent. The walls were carved stone, smoother and more deliberate than anything they had seen so far. It didn't look like a natural formation. It looked built, designed, abandoned long before the war. Old wooden beams lay collapsed on the floor, remnants of a structure no one recognized. Strange metal hooks protruded from the ceiling, rusted but firmly embedded. The soldiers whispered among themselves, fear creeping into their tone. Whoever built this place never intended it to be found. In the center of the chamber lay a rusted rail cart, overturned and empty. No tools, no supplies, no clues. Only the echo of their lanterns crackling. When they continued deeper, one lantern sputtered and died, plunging the rear of the group into near darkness. Another flickered. The officer ordered everyone to conserve fuel, but the flames weakened even when untouched. It was as if the tunnel itself was feeding on their light. The men tightened formation. Shadows grew longer, curling unnaturally along the walls. At one point, a soldier insisted he saw a silhouette at the far end of the corridor, a human shape moving away from them. But when they rushed forward, the shape dissolved into darkness. No one spoke of it again. The rear guard was the first to disappear. One moment he was walking, lantern held high. The next, his light vanished with a soft, metallic clang. The man didn't scream, didn't shout, didn't drop his weapon. He simply ceased to exist within the beam of lantern light. The officer ordered a halt. The men searched the floor, the walls, the crevices. No footprints, no dropped rifle, no drag marks, no sign of collapse. The tunnel was untouched. Fear spread like fire. The rear position was reassigned, but no one wanted it. Eyes darted into every shadow, expecting the darkness to move. For the first time, the officer admitted they might not be alone down there. Eventually, they reached another chamber, smaller and more claustrophobic than the first. The walls were covered in deep scratches, long, jagged marks carved by metal or something harder. Some ran horizontally, others vertically. They formed no pattern, no message, no recognizable meaning. The men ran their fingers over them. The grooves were old, older than any soldier there could imagine. Dust lay thick in the cuts. Whatever made those marks had done so many decades ago. Yet the freshest scratches, the ones near the floor, looked disturbingly new. Following the tunnel ahead, they came to a fork. Two identical paths yawning open like twin jaws. The officer chose the left without hesitation. They marched forward for nearly half an hour before realizing something was terribly wrong. The tunnel began sloping downward, subtly at first, then sharply. The air grew colder, thinner. The men felt their breaths quicken, their chests tighten. One soldier looked back. His lantern illuminated a piece of cloth stuck to a jagged rock, cloth from their own unit. It was shredded, fresh, untouched by dust. They were walking in circles underground. A distant rumble echoed from the depths. The ground trembled under their boots, stones rattled, dust fell like rain. The men braced themselves as the trembling intensified. Then, with a deafening crash, the tunnel ahead collapsed, huge slabs of stone sealing the passage in an instant. They were trapped once more, forced to turn back. But the path behind them felt different now, wider, colder, as if the tunnel had changed shape. The officer raised his lantern to speak, only to freeze as he saw something move behind the last soldier. Something that slipped silently into the darkness when the light touched it. With both directions uncertain, the officer made the hardest decision of his life. They would descend deeper, following a narrow passage sloping into the earth like the throat of some vast creature. The air grew colder with each step. The men felt the weight of the earth pressing down, making every breath harder. Their lights dimmed. Shadows grew thicker. Then came the sound, soft, almost gentle, a whispering breeze where no wind should exist. It carried a faint rhythm, something like words but too distorted to understand. When the lead lantern flickered out, the men halted in panic. Only one lantern remained. Its flame trembled violently, as if fighting to stay alive. Then it died. Darkness swallowed the company whole. By the time search teams uncovered the sealed entrance weeks later, the tunnel beyond had collapsed completely. No bodies were found, no equipment, no footprints, no trace that any soldier had ever set foot below. The tunnel, it seems, had taken back everything it once held, and the earth above remained quiet,